She was born into a world of crowns and intrigue, a Belgian princess destined for a future no one could have foreseen. Charlotte of Mexico, daughter of Leopold I, the first king of the Belgians, and Louise Marie of Orléans. Her birth in 1840 was an event of dynastic importance. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel if you like these videos, and leave a like. Now let's start. In the castle of Bouchoux, Belgium, in 1926, an 86-year-old woman spent her last days conversing with a mannequin she affectionately called Maximilian. For 60 years, since she had completely lost touch with reality in 1867, Empress Charlotte of Mexico had lived in an imaginary world where her husband was still alive, and she continued to reign over an empire that had never really existed. To understand how a little girl born a princess in the castle of Laeken, promised to a life of privilege, ended her days in the darkness of madness, we must go back to the beginning of a story that was born not of love, but of the coldest of political strategies. Maria Carlotta, Amalia, Augusta, Vittoria, Clementina, Leopoldina of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha was born on June 7, 1840, near Brussels. Daughter of King Leopold I of Belgium and the French princess Louise Maria of Orléans. From the first moment, she was considered a pawn on the European chessboard. Her name was a tribute to the late Princess Charlotte of Wales, Leopold's first wife, who died in childbirth in 1817. Charlotte's childhood was marked by a profound isolation which would pervade her entire existence. At the age of 10, she lost her mother, who died of tuberculosis. She was entrusted to the Countess of Hulst, a friend of the family, but unable to fill the emotional void left by that loss. Leopold I, distant and calculating, she saw in her children the tools to consolidate her young dynasty. From an early age, Carlotta was aware that her future did not belong to her. She would be given in marriage to strengthen alliances. She received a refined and severe education: French, German, English, Italian, Spanish, history, politics, music, geography, court etiquette. But behind the apparent perfection, Carlotta wrote that she felt like clay, molded for others. At 15, in 1855, negotiations for her marriage began. Two were the main candidates: Peter V of Portugal and Prince George of Saxony. The Belgian king was preparing to place her where he would obtain the greatest political and financial advantages. The first real pretender was Peter V, also supported by Queen Victoria of England. But the Portuguese court was strictly Catholic, supervised by clerics, and the Countess of Hulst warned Charlotte of what awaited her. Charlotte refused. In a letter to her grandmother, she wrote, "Yes, Peter is a king. I could be a queen. But what value does it have? Crowns today are burdens, and how much one regrets after having accepted them for such superficial reasons." She was only 16 years old, but that act of independence came at a high cost. Her father, furious, treated her coldly and distantly. She had missed a precious opportunity, and the message was clear: future alternatives would be less promising. It was in this climate that Archduke Ferdinand, Maximilian of Habsburg, younger brother of Emperor Franz Joseph, appeared. He visited Brussels in May 1856, and the meeting with Charlotte changed everything. Unlike the previous candidates, Maximilian was young, brilliant, with modern visions, perfectly aligned with the education received by Carlotta. He found her fascinating, cultured, out of the ordinary. She, for the first time, felt considered as a person and not a dynastic trophy. Leopold initially hesitated. Maximilian was not offering a throne, only a possible viceroyalty in Lombardy-Veneto. But he let himself be convinced. A long negotiation then began, lasting 10 months, in which the king treated his daughter as if she were a good to be traded. Dowry, titles, guarantees, conditions for a court worthy of the Belgian lineage. She wrote to Maximilian, "You have gained my trust, but it was my duty to proceed with caution." Charlotte, in love, saw in Maximilian an escape from the cage of the court. She wrote, "If he really becomes Viceroy of Italy, it would be magnificent. That is all I desire." The engagement was made official on December the 23rd, 1856. The wedding was celebrated on July 27th, 1857, in Brussels. For Belgium, it was a diplomatic triumph. Franz Joseph appointed Maximilian Viceroy of Lombardy-Veneto. The couple moved to Milan and lived the 2 happiest years of their lives. Reforms, promotion of the arts, a humane and liberal style of government. Carlotta shone in the role, competent, respected, esteemed. But in 1859, the end came. Emperor Franz Joseph forced Maximilian to resign. He was too tolerant of the Italian rebels, too expensive. They returned to the castle of Miramare on the Gulf of Trieste. Isolated, embittered, they sought a new purpose. They founded in 1863, when a Mexican delegation, supported by Napoleon III's France, offered Maximilian the crown of Mexico. The French wanted to turn the country into a protectorate and were looking for a credible European ruler. Carlotta was thrilled. Finally a kingdom, finally a project. She wrote, "To found a dynasty and take care of the people. This is the destiny for which I was prepared." On April 10th, 1864, they officially accepted the crown after complex international negotiations. On April 14th, they set sail from Trieste on the frigate Novara. During the voyage, Carlotta studied Spanish and Mexican history with dedication. But the arrival was a shock. They landed in Veracruz on May 28th and were greeted with indifference, if not hostility. The entry into Mexico City on June 12th was organized but cold. The reality was very different from the one dreamed. Charlotte threw herself into the role of empress with energy. She chose Chapultepec Castle as her residence, established a regency system, promoted educational reforms, and administered a loan during her husband's absences. For 3 years, she was technically the first woman to govern Mexico. But the empire was wavering. Benito Juárez's troops did not accept the new order, and the Civil War continued. Napoleon III gradually withdrew military support, leaving them isolated. In 1866, Charlotte, aware that the empire would not survive without European aid, set out alone to seek support. In Paris, Napoleon III dismissed her with vague promises. He was no longer interested in Mexico. In Rome, she implored Pope Pius IX. It was there that the first obvious signs of mental breakdown emerged. Carlotta developed an obsessive paranoia. She feared being poisoned. She drank only water from public fountains. The Pope, shocked by her condition, made an exception, never before granted, he granted her refuge in the Vatican, where she became the only woman in history to sleep within the papal walls. An extraordinary gesture, but not for honor. It was the prelude to ruin. That's all for today. And what do you think of this story? Let me know in the comments. Your opinion is very important to me. See you next time. Bye.